Coffee with the Editor is proudly brought to you by IRZ. Good morning and welcome to Coffee with the Editor. This morning I have Jack van der Merwe, CEO of Gautrain Management Agency. Let's start with the impact the Gautrain has had on Gauteng.
Gauteng is the first public transport that has become a mode of choice. In our country we have public transport which is a mode of force. People who have no option gets forced to use the taxis or the buses or metro rail. In this case we have people, 77% of our ridership are people who have left their cars at home and are using the train. And this is an international trend where you have to start focusing on public transport, making it the mode of choice because of pollution, because of congestion.
Why is rail, as part of the public transport mix, so important outside of the environmental aspects?
You have to have an integrated public transport system, and there is a place for each mode of transport. But what makes rail unique is the capacity it has. You can move 40 or 50,000 people per hour on rail on a very narrow reserve, which none of the other modes can do. So rail usually forms the backbone.
What do you think has been the biggest learning experience out of Gautrain, and how is that going to be carried through the next development phase of the system?
Look, I think the thing is, Madiba said, it always seems impossible until it's done. But what the people, they really think that once it's done, it was easy. I think we've gone through quite a lot of learning curves. Firstly, how to work with mega companies from overseas. They are sharp and they are here to make money. How do you handle these consortiums that come from overseas? How do you handle the EIA? What contract form we have to have? So in the new Gautrain 2, we will have a bit of a different contract form. We will first do the civil works in a normal contracts and then do a PPP for the operations. So there's a lot of those things that we have to do. But I think we've gone through a very steep learning curve. And I think looking back, we didn't make too many mistakes.
Where in the approval process is the proposed expansion?
We've registered as a public-private partnership, and in terms of the Public Finance Management Act, we have to, there's a Schedule 16 that controls all the PPPs, so we have to get Treasury Authorization 1, which is feasibility. We've done that, we've handed it in about 18 months ago. We have been asked to look at different fare scenarios, to look at way of value capturing around the stations. So we feel that within the next 6 months, we would, especially after the election, we will then get surety are we going to build, which phases we're going to build.
The route that you guys are starting with?
The main route, I think if one looks at Johannesburg's development, you have the M1 and the M2, which is the inner ring. Then you have the concrete highway, which, the N1 bypass. And all the developments are keeping on jumping over the ring. So there's a massive demand for moving people from on the outer ring into Johannesburg. So the first link has to be coming from Randburg into Sand. So our first link, and we will build a link from Cosmo, from Little Falls to Cosmo to Randburg into Sand.
I think that would be quite an economical route as well.
Yes, there's a massive demand.
And then the route linking to Soweto?
Well, that would be the second route. We will then go from Little Falls to Roodepoort to Jabulani and Soweto.
How long do you think that construction period will last?
We've broken up the project into 5 sections, and it's really a function of what is our cash flow, what is the cash flow that one wants to do. realistically, best case scenario, most will be 10 years of construction. The worst case scenario, or the limited funds, 15 to 20 years to do the complete system from Mamelodi down to Jabulani, from Lanseria down to Boxport.
I'd like to see that in my lifetime.
I would also like.
So there's been a bit of a hiccup with the procurement of additional rolling stock.
Well, I think maybe this is one of the lessons that you learn, is that the rolling stock is produced on a conveyor belt system. And what the companies like to do is to have a big order and then to run it off. We were looking for 48 carriages, 12 trains, and it's a very small number. So to set up a factory, and with that we have 65% local content requirements, so it's very difficult. And it's a leap of faith that the company must do to say, I'm going to set up a whole production line to do that. So we haven't received a bid which is compliant, but we're looking at alternatives. We're looking at maybe looking at pre-owned rolling stock. We've been to England. There is quite a lot of possibilities there. So we will be developing that to see where we can address it. If that's the case, we'll actually be getting the rolling stock earlier than what we would have originally intended to get.
So was there no opportunity, and my readership would probably kill me at this point, but to apply for either an exemption because it is a small order and isn't feasible for local production to be set up here to manufacture those? Or would it not be a case of just procuring from the OEM where the rolling stock currently comes from? Because is there not going to be an interoperability issue, like new technology versus the technology that you have now?
There's a few things. I don't think local content was the big issue. The big issue is the size of the order.
Yeah.
Our Gautrain is based on the Electrostar, which is a Bombardier rolling stock. It's been produced in Derby in England, and they have, I think 3 years ago, stopped making the Electrostar. So they now have got a model called the Event Truck, and they're busy making that. So there is a problem. You have to actually change the technology back to get to our technology. And I think that was why Bombardier themselves weren't so keen on doing it.
Okay.
So the interoperability would be easier if one were to buy pre-owned rolling stock. But if one looks at London, Paris, all the big metros, there is a mixture of rolling stock operating. Okay. And what we think we're going to do, we have two systems running there, north-south, from Hatfield through to Park, and then we have the east-west from Sandton to the airport. So we will move all the existing Gautrains that are running east-west onto the north-south line, and then the new rolling stock will then run the airport line.
You recently raised a few items in an interview that were impacting on the Gautrain patronage. Specifically, I think you mentioned them as the industrial action, theft, capacity, first and last mile. Are these the only reasons?
Yes, I think there is I think the economy, of course, the downturn in the economy, everything is slowing down. The fact of the e-tolls, and it's back in the news, the e-tolls now. When we built the system, the e-tolls were not on the table. During the construction or during our process, the e-tolls became a reality. We had a look at it. It was a competition for the Gautrain, but it was aimed at tolling. And it would have cost you originally about 1,200 rand per month. So it would have been comparable, and we would have then not had a free competition. At the moment we have a free competition, so all the capacity that was created on the freeways are now free, and the people are using it. So there was a shift from Benchcomot to our system is slower than what we predicted.
What aspects are kind of like within the control of the Gautrain going forward in terms of addressing, getting the numbers back up? Certainly the last and first mile, not everybody wants to use a bus, we want to use an Uber. I've mentioned in one of my editor's comments that Craig and I we're unfortunate to have just in a Gautrain station being pulled out of our Uber and a meter taxi. What is Gautrain doing to address this?
We have to tweak the service that's in our gift, and that is we're going to run 2 more trains. So at the moment we have 2 backup trains that are on standby if there's a breakdown. We've now worked on a plan to bring them into the service. So that will increase. We're looking at the seating. We're looking at running longer periods through that. So we're tweaking the internal services. Externally, the big worry is the Uber Taxify. Our security, we don't have power of arrest. We don't have firearms. So you can go up to a point, but then the South African police services have to come to the point. Last year, you will remember in October month, there was a real focused intervention by the South African police services, and it calmed down. But I think our police services are a reactive force. I don't think we have the capacity now to be a preventive force, to be visible but not having action everywhere. Not having a crisis to attend to. So we will have to down the line get a compromise between the two.
Yeah.
This is the 4th industrial revolution, sort of like crashing with the 1st industrial revolution. And I go overseas, and when I get into a taxi at the airport, I always ask the taxi, what about Uber? Man, and I have a war there. People say, get out of my taxi, one Uber, don't go there. So Uber has created, but this disruptive technology. If one looks at Airbnb, the big hotel chains that have spent billions of rands on building up hotels. Airbnb doesn't own one hotel, one room.
Yeah.
And I think there's now 4 million beds per night being utilized in the world by Airbnb. So this is something that you really have to start working on. If I may say, on Friday, the legislature approved the Gauteng Transport Authority bill. And the Transport Authority has to look at Gauteng as a unit and say, how do we have an integrated public transport? And there's 2 issues that'll have to be done. One is to look at the taxis as a whole, and the second one is to look at this Uber intervention into that. So it's not an easy answer, but it has to be addressed. Because exactly as you say, people, they don't want a conflict. So if you come to the airport in Watambo, and you're going to go with the Gautrain to Sandton, but there you may have a conflict. You may decide at the airport to use Uber directly. The only thing, of course, is that as congestion gets worse, you're stuck in the same traffic, and your predictability, and especially going to the airport, becomes a big problem.
Because we hear those stories, and those stories are amplified. That somebody got stuck on the train on the way to the airport, but by the same context, they've been stuck in traffic and also missed their flight.
We run punctuality and availability. Our punctuality is now 99.5%. Our availability is 98.7% average. This is comparable to the best systems in the world. If a train is 180 seconds late, it's marked as late. So, and I know if you get stuck, if you or the unlucky train get stuck, you could on a daily basis be the unlucky person on bench school that's getting stuck.
Yes, absolutely. Explain to me the patronage guarantee. It seems that people are still not quite understanding what it is and why it's important.
Maybe if we can just go one step back. Public transport is a social service. So public transport per se receives a subsidy, and this is not in South Africa. This is throughout the world.
Yes.
And to give you an example, public transport obviously is determined by the peak demand, and public transport during the peak, the demand is bigger than the supply, but the rest of the day the supply is bigger than the demand. So you have in the peak, you have school children going to school, and you have people come to work. Now, the politicians come and they say, but school children should travel at half price. And then they say old people should travel for free. So all of a sudden you're doing a social service, but and then you're expected to make a profit. So every public transport mode has a subsidy. Now we come with a Gautrain, and we say there's an income from the fare box, and there's a cost to run the system. And we then said the difference is called the patronage guarantee. Now, I think the first mistake is people are now comparing subsidy to patronage guarantee, and that's where the mathematics don't work out. Patronage guarantee is 5 components. We've asked the concessionaire as a PPP to borrow money, and that money has to be repaid. So we have a loan repayment, which obviously our loan repayment works on a 12-year repayment, and so after 12 years of the concession, which is within the next 2 years, the loans will be repaid. So the one block of money is for the loan repayment. The next block of money is for maintenance. Now all other public transport modes have got an operating subsidy and they have a maintenance budget. This maintenance is in the patronage guarantee. The third one, which is very important, is that we have to, in terms of concession, we get the service back in a prescribed condition. One of our conditions are that the buses may not be older than 10 years. So we have 125 buses, the concession is 15 years, so all the buses must be replaced before then. All the key components have to be replaced or upgraded to get there. The fourth one is the subsidy. It's the shortfall that we have on the operations, and the fifth one is the profit that the concessionaire makes. So all that happens is that we will always pay a subsidy, but if you can't say patronage guarantee, which is now all 5, compares to somebody else's subsidy. And I think that's where the argument came from. The last point that I want to make is that the PPP regulation says you must develop a financial model. And the financial model has to, on a semester basis, for the full duration of the project, say what the costs are, what the expenditure is, how the cash flow is going to work. So you can say to me, what will it cost in the first semester of 2024? And the financial model will show it. And that financial model forms the heart of Treasury Authorization 3. So the financial model was developed, it was approved in 2006, and that was actually the go-ahead, go and build the train. So all of these costs are in the financial model. So it's not a surprise. It's not, and I think that's what went wrong in the media. People said, the ESCOM is asking for another 20%. The SABC is asking for a bailout. The SA is for a bailout. This is a new bailout. This is not a new bailout. This is a planned expenditure, which is done.
And concluded many years ago.
And it was approved on that. So it is not a surprise.
So what happens when that 15 years is done?
Well,
because that's quite close.
26th of March, 2026, which is 7 years from now, the concession ends. We have 4 options.
Okay.
First option is to extend the concession, but it would be a short-term extension, 1 year or 2 years, because there's a whole question of refurbishing the train, and the whole risk profile would be very difficult to negotiate for many years. So that's the first option. The second option is that we've now received this network in a prescribed condition, and we as the GMA or the provincial government can say we'll run it ourselves. So we'll create the Praza or the Metro line, which I hope we won't have. The third option is that we can say, let's go out on concession just to operate the system. Now remember, we started off with a greenfields project, now it's brownfields. We have ridership, we have people, we have an image, we have everything. So we just ask people like RATP and Transport for London and those people come and operate our system. And that operational contract will usually be between 20 and 25 years. It would be a much simpler concession. The fourth option is that we say, and this really depends on Gautrain too, we say we'd like to build a link to Randburg. If it doesn't happen, they always like to extend it to this. So all of a sudden the concession becomes construction again and operations. And it becomes complicated like Gautrain. So those are the four options. And unfortunately, 7 years from now, if one just works backwards, we have to start developing the documents. We have to make a decision what we're going to do and go out on procurement, because when the clock starts 26th of March 2020, we must be ready with one of the four options.
What are the current numbers for Gautrain versus previous years? I mean,
yeah, we are transporting between 55 and 60,000 passengers per day on the train, and about 21,000 passengers per day on the buses. So it's about 1.4 million passengers per month, and about 300,000 to 400,000 passengers on the bus. So we've transported, I think, about 104 million people now.
there's been a draft rail paper recently. How does that impact, or does that impact the Gautrain?
Oh, well, yes. Maybe, I don't know when you'll remember, South Africa's got the narrow gauge. It's called the Cape gauge. And that's the old 3'6" wide track, which is 1,067 millimeters wide. And all the rolling stock was built on that. And the old railway people had the world record of running on a narrow gauge at 227 kilometers per hour. So when we started off and we said we wanted the standard gauge, there was a war.
There still is a war.
But now if the white paper on rail has buried that war, because what is happening is that rail has got a few functions. The one function is freight. And the only way that you can move freight, in the world you have two types of freight. You have the iron ore and the coal, the big mass raw materials, but then you have containers. And to make the rail profitable, you have to have double stacked containers on the rail. And it can't run on a narrow track. You have too much of a risk of it falling over. So the white paper on rail says wide gauge or standard gauge for that. But we have 26,000 kilometers of rail in the country, and it's impossible to just wave a wand and say everything's going to change. So the rail argument on gauge has forever been settled, which I think. The other point says that, which is more important for public transport, is that at the moment Metro Rail operates in 4 provinces. It has 3 big provinces, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal and the Western Cape, and then a smaller one in Port Elizabeth. So and they say the Metro Rail must be devolved to the provinces. And if one thinks about it, what happens to trains and how they operate in Cape Town has really got nothing to do with how they operate in Gauteng. The other thing is that if you ever want to have an integrated system, everything must be in one point. So what they've said in the white paper is that they'd like to devolve the operational subsidy so that you have a service level agreement with Metro Rail within 3 years and the full infrastructure within 7 years.
Okay.
And again, that's not a lot of time. But what is special in the case of Gauteng, we have 3 metropolitan areas wall to wall. Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, Johannesburg, and the rail runs through all of them. So it would not make sense to break up Metro Rail into 3 parts. And that's really why the Transport Authority, one of the functions would be to take over the Metro Rail function in Gauteng. And that, then you would have 2 rail systems, the Gautrain and the Metro Rail system. Now, you can ask why should there be two systems? If one looks, and you go back in history, the metro rail or the rail system we have in Gauteng was developed 100 years ago. And it was developed with two things in mind: farm to market and the mining industry. So the trains are running on the pathways run, and they're running to get product from the farms to market. It's not running from where people live to where they work. And that's why the Gautrain, because we could build it from scratch, we actually have the home work trip. It's covered. So the Gautrain will keep on doing home work trip. Metro Rail's challenge is to now take the recapitalized the Gibella rolling stock and upgrade the network and then start running these trains. They are comparable to the Gautrain. They are magic trains. They are actually 30% more energy efficient. They're a new breed of rolling stock. We are making, Metro Rail, Plaza is making 1 carriage a day at the Gibella factory. They are making every 3.5 months, they're making a full Gautrain fleet. Every 3.5 months. So the tender is to produce 3,600 carriages in the next 10 years. So, and then there's a possibility of doubling that in the following 10 years. So this is the age of rail. We're going to get this new rolling stock, and the idea is then to push up the punctuality, availability, and move the people.
So, I mean, it has a profound.
Oh yes, and what is quite interesting, it's the first policy statement on rail in 100 years in our country. It's actually long overdue. But I mean, the previous government had a policy of a disinvestment of rail. We had the Villiers Commission of Inquiry that said, don't invest in rail. And within a year, they were spending 3-4 billion rand. And that's, in those days, it was a lot of money. They were spending 3-4 billion rand per year on rail. And after this report was in, they fell to 500,000. It was just stopped. And they moved everything to road, and transport to road. And now we're sitting, on the M3 from Durban to Johannesburg, 21 hours a day. There's more trucks on the road than cars. 21 hours. And they're running, our road depot can't take it, and it's inefficient. You can't move stock, freight over such long distances by road.
Is that because Transnet just doesn't have the capacity to pick up that additional that additional freight?
Because I think these big infrastructure departments, it takes a while to turn it around. It takes a while to break it. It takes a while to fix it. So Transnet has to. Transnet, that they appointed the consultant, Kenzie.
Yeah.
And we know what
Yeah.
But they have to. One should have. I don't think you should move freight by road further than 400, maybe 300 kilometers. Longer distances than that, it becomes more efficient. But I think one thing that we lose out of sight, is that we're in the industry. We think we're moving trains, or we're moving buses, or we're moving cars. We're actually moving people or freight. So door to door is the issue, and home to work is the issue. In the case of rail, there's only a portion of the trip that we can control. And as you said in the beginning, the last mile and the first mile, that's really the kicker. That, if that doesn't work, you just don't get onto the train.
What are your thoughts on technology like hyperloop and?
Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. It took 104 years for the telephone to be installed in every person's house, and not even in the world, but in the developing countries. They had to then build the copper network of telephone lines and, you know, the whole thing spreading around the country. New technology now takes 19 days to be installed. 19. And what is even worse is and what people in the industry do, they take the existing industry and they make little adjustments to improve it. So it's an incremental increase, and everybody in the business, they have a vested interest and they are just, you know, making a little bit better. You get people coming from the side who've got no clue with transport, like Google, like with Uber and that, and they just turn it's on its head. You know. So I'm not saying never, but the hyperloop, man, you know, they're going to put you in a capsule. I don't know whether they're going to get you out of that capsule. You know? so I'm a bit skeptical,
Yeah.
but it's there. You know, the new technology is there, and what scares me and excites me is that people that have got nothing to do with your industry just flies into your industry and shakes the tree and gets this massive jump. Because if one looks at Uber and what Uber has done, they haven't looked at the technology. They've looked at the people. They've said, what do people want? And you want to be able to have on your phone a guy that says, this is my number, this is a photograph of me, this is what I look like, I'll take you to where you want to be. You know? And you come to a restaurant, you have a meal, and you have a few drinks, and you say Uber, and they say, and there's 10 of them circling around, yeah, within 2 minutes you're in the Uber and you go home. So they haven't addressed the technology part, the infrastructure part. They just looked at the need. Airbnbs, they've done the same. So it's exciting stuff that's happening.
Where do you see the future of rail in terms of passenger transport both in South Africa, and what is your opinion for Africa?
Well, maybe again, if I can go back to the telephone. I mean, you know, a country like Nigeria, they hadn't rolled out the copper network for the telephone system. But what they did, they jumped. They went to the cell phone. So that's why cell phone is the biggest market for MTN and Vodacom and that, because they just skipped that part. Now, if Africa is clever, they can skip a lot of steps and go directly to it. So Africa, they have to unlock Africa through rail. They have to unlock the resources that they can do, the trade and movement of people. So rail, this is the last frontier for the world to come into Africa to say, how do we develop it? We have the youngest population, so the future is here. So I think it's great, but I think what we need is longer term plan. We need people who have got a longer vision and a longer plan for infrastructure. Unfortunately, infrastructure is a very slow process. I mean, I've looked at these big projects. They take on average 14 years from inception until somebody gets over. We can't have, I think in South Africa, we have DGs now, the average time for a DG is 3.7 years. So, you know, and I think our whole focus is different. If they make me a DG for 3 years and I want to perform, I'll just cut all the maintenance out because nothing will fall over in 3 years' time. But if they make me a DG and I think I'm going to stay there for 20 years, I'm going to make sure that you maintain the things because it's going to fall over in 10 years' time and then I'm stuck with a big problem. So you have to have longer term visions.
And would that be better maintained through or better implemented through actually like a council, I want to call it like a knowledge council. So that would be your visionaries and your planners where the DGs then just kind of fits in and engage with them. I mean,
well, you know, just as public transport has got a role for everyone, government also has a role for everyone. There's a role for technocrats and there's a role for politicians, and you can't mix the two. You can't have a DG who's appointed because of his political affiliation, and as soon as the minister leaves, he leaves with the minister. There has to be a DG that says, man, I'm here for the long run. I'm here to do a long-term vision. So it's just a question of attitude that you have to have. Then you can do it. I mean, we have the skills, we have the people, but we just don't have the time.
why doesn't Cape Town and Durban have a Gautrain?
Durban, to start off with, you'll remember they bid for the Commonwealth Games. And part of their bid was they were going to put in a railway line from Kinshasa to Durban to Pietermaritzburg, so they were going to run. So they were busy planning it, and they asked me to come and help them there. But that unfortunately fell by the wayside. And I think one of the lessons that you have to learn is that rail can't be built for an event. I mean, if we come back to the Gautrain was announced in 2000. We were given the Soccer World Cup in 2004. And I remember Minister Trevor Mandel phoned me and he said, "Jack van der Merwe, if you ever link the train to the soccer, I'll kill you." That next day, the Premier and everybody said, "We're going to have it ready for the soccer." And I phoned the minister and said, "Kill them and don't kill me." And I think that's where the Durban one then fell by the wayside, because the moment they then said we aren't going to have the Commonwealth Games, then they felt as if the need is gone down. But that's really not got anything to do with it. If there's a flow of people from the airport to Durban, and the airport was built quite a distance away. And obviously Durban and Pietermaritzburg operate similarly to Pretoria and Joburg, and that's a little bit further away. So if the volume is justified, it should be. So there, I think there is a case, and I think they should run. Cape Town has got Cape Flats with all the developments there. There is a massive demand, but there is a very good rail system, but it's old and it's broken. If one can get the new rolling stock in there, upgrade the stations, because remember, the commuters don't burn the train, they burn the service. They are constantly late, they're constantly delayed. You come to your work, you say to your boss, "The train was late, you're 2 hours late." He says, "Fine." The next day you come and you say, "I'm 2 hours late." The third day the boss says to you, "Sorry, I can't work with you if and you lose your job." So you have to bring the service up. So I think, and Cape Town has got quite a nice rail system, because you've got the mountain on one side and the sea on the other side. You've got a rail line running from Muizenberg right through and Sea Point and all those places. So there is a system, it must just be upgraded. The question that you haven't asked me is that, do we have a high-speed rail? Should we have a high-speed rail from Durban to Johannesburg, Cape Town to Johannesburg?
Yes, linked like that, we should.
But again, it's a question of volumes. We don't at the moment have enough volumes. In Europe, what works well in Europe is that they have a good rail system. So you can, in the heart of Paris, at Gautrain, you get a train, and it goes, a high-speed train, to anywhere in France, or it goes to England, it goes down to Spain. And you end up in the heart of the city. So the first thing you save is that travel out of the city to the airport, then landing at the airport, coming back. If you're in Paris, the hotel says to you, if you're flying out 5 hours before you fly out, you must go. So your trip is immediately 5 hours longer, because you must make sure that you don't get caught in the traffic. And so in Europe, every trip under about 600 kilometers will be done by high-speed rail, without a doubt. But they have the volumes. In our case, we just don't have the volumes now to justify that interaction.
Because I think it would also have a significant impact on our domestic flights or the aviation industry. If we put in high speed between Cape Town, Durban and Johannesburg, it would probably be more economical to go by train than it would a domestic flight, unless it was time sensitive.
No. It's not time sensitive, it's cost sensitive. That will cost a fortune. It really costs too much. Because remember, if you develop high-speed rail, your geometrics are very, very horrendous. You have to have, you can't have a curve the curvature of less than 6 kilometer curvature. So if you were to build a high-speed rail from Joburg to Durban, the Japanese came, or maybe you will know Transnet bought the old Durban airport. The idea is that we're going to build a harbour there for the containers, and then have a rail link going from there to Johannesburg. And they said, but let's build the railway line so you can run high-speed trains. And I said, you can't run it at a gradient more than 2%. You can't have a curve sharper than a 6 kilometer radius. And I said, man, if you want to do that, you're going to have about 180, 190 kilometers of tunnel between Pretoria and Durban. Just as a guess. The Japanese came and they designed a high-speed railway, and they had, I think, 150 kilometers of tunnel. Now, to build 150 kilometers of tunnel is a lot of money. And the numbers between Durban and Joburg, I think there's 10,000 passengers per week or something. So you could never justify it.
But if we built it, it would take like 15 years to build.
Yeah, no.
Just like some long term.
No, I mean, if we go back again and say, if we build the freight corridor between Durban and Pretoria, and then you can have sleeper trains. You get on the train at 8 o'clock at night, and you sleep on the train, you come to Joburg. I think that'll work very well, and that could be cheaper. But I mean, in our country, we have our long distance trains are Socialose Mail and the Blue Train, and the ridership's just gone down. The ridership's gone down. We're transporting really less and less people.
Well, I can explain to you why.
I think again it's a question of predictability, breakdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Leaving on time.
Yeah, if the president of the country gets stuck in the metro rail train for 2 hours, for 3 hours, man, it's a problem. It really is a problem. And what makes rail even worse is you're stuck in a capsule. You're stuck. You can't get out. You can't get out and walk. If your car breaks down, you're on the road. You can hike. You can get a taxi.
Do something.
If your train breaks down in the middle of the veld, that's it. You're stuck on the train.
Yeah.
And we saw it with the run up to the election in '94. I don't know if you remember, but we had those deaths on the train where they threw the people off the train. Man, it had a massive impact on the ridership. Because again, you feel you're now locked in. You're now locked in with a criminal in the train. So I think what is a good thing, way back we had railway police, and they just looked at railways. And then they got incorporated into SA police services. Yeah. And again, if railway police is there for just prevention and visibility, versus there's a riot somewhere, there's things being burned, they will always go to that crisis. And about 10 or 15 years back, 10 years back, they decided to reinstate. But now they call transport police, but they are operational on trains and on buses.
Yeah.
So that's the right step.
So could you not deploy those just on the perimeter of your stations to keep Uber driven passengers safe?
35 policemen on our trains, but they're on the trains. They aren't outside.
I need them outside.
Yeah. No, as I say again, we have to.
The stations in your new proposed plans, you have now made provision for the Uber drop-offs and the different modes of first and last mile. Please tell me you've done that.
No, but no, wait. In the stations we have, there is provision for that. But remember how it works. You drive into the station, and then you park there.
Yeah.
But you can drive into the station and be there for 15 minutes without paying. So there's a non-paying area, and that's where the drop-off is.
Okay.
Now, all that is happening is that but that's where the buses also operate. If we have a conflict between Uber and the taxis, both of them can come into the station. And then the conflict is inside the station. And then the conflict is where the buses are being. So you're actually escalating the conflict, and you're escalating the exposure of the people to the conflict. So that's a problem. We will make provision in our new stations too, but if you can't solve the conflict, you actually want the point of conflict, not to be inside the station.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me a story.
We have 10 stations, excepting now the airport, but the 9 stations we say should have feeder distributing services to it. At that stage, the word BRT had to be defined in South Africa, so we said we want to make sure that the passengers get to the station in a way. That's where we instituted the buses. Now, while we were developing it, we designed the station in Marlborough, and then the concessionaire came and he wanted to go underneath the N3. So he said he's going to move the station down the hill and then to allow him to go underneath the N3. But by moving it down, the station became Alex. So we have a Marlborough station, which is actually Alex. And I don't know if you've seen the plan that says you just change the name, which actually makes sense because it doesn't make sense to say Alex, but Marlborough station is actually Alex. Johannesburg then did their BRTs. They designed it and they said one of the routes would run from Sandton to Alex. And the Alex Taxi Association said, if you bring a BRT bus in here, we'll burn it. And they were so serious that Johannesburg actually ripped out that link and said, we're not going. So here comes Van der Merwe, and we now have to get buses running in and out of the station, the Marlborough station, which is actually Alex. So I thought, we could have the same thing. So I said, let's make a plan. So we sat down with the 2 taxi associations in Alex, and we said, how can we work this out? It took us 9 months. We agreed, we fund the buses up front, we give them a start capital. The buses are branded as Gautrain, they're operated by the taxis, and they run the feeder system. So in Marlborough, there's no buses, there's only the taxis. It's working so well that we've done it now at Rhodesfield, we've done it at Centurion. Johannesburg has asked us to do it at Rosebank. So for the first time, there is, and I mean these taxis, they if you get in the taxi and you say go, it says, I'm on a schedule, 10 past 8, I'll go. And he doesn't wait until the taxi is full, 10 past 8, he goes. And the people love it. These 22-seater buses. And I want to, if I talk to you again in 5 years' time, I want to say to you, I now have 18 of those buses operating. I want to tell you then I have 180, 280, or 380. Because that's the last mile that I can then say to these guys, and they branded, the quality, there's a standard and everything, and that's the solution. If we could have worked that solution out, I need to work a solution out with the Uber and the meeting taxis. We have to get a plan.
You have to.
Yeah.
It was a terrifying experience.
No, I can imagine that. Yeah, so.
Yeah, at least I live to tell the tale. There's quite a few people who haven't.
But again, you see exactly, you've now proven the point. You have got a choice. And the moment you have a choice, you say, I'll make another choice. In the case of public transport as a mode of force, you don't have a choice.
No.
You either stay at home, lose your job, or you use whatever it is
available
given to you.
Yeah. Jack, thank you very much for your time.
It's a pleasure.